obviously for the general safety, security, and trustworthiness, we have the European idea what kind of properties these models should have, ranging from robustness, privacy, transparency, and so on. And I think our ambition needs to be to innovate by rigorous methodology and foundations that really can ensure these properties. Although I think many of the efforts right now are more empirically, we have very strong methods, and it's a bit of a tragedy that some of them don't really scale up to the models that are really interested right now. So there's a bit of a gap, but I think our ambition should remain to provide rigorous foundations and guarantees to ensure these important properties. I'd like to illustrate a bit what's happening right now with LLMs, as again, they have taken, so to say, a fast track career, I would call it right now, starting out with the chatbots writing funny jokes and memes and so on. But again, they have quickly developed as our maybe trusty assistant, as, for example, co-pilot in coding tasks, where they actually support us in very critical roles. And I think in terms of their role as information retriever and mediator, like in applications like Google Gemini, they actually take a very critical role and a pivotal part in our information ecosystem. And while we might be concerned with biases they might have, how they represent information to us, I think this will become even more concerning, as I'll later outline some of the challenges they have in terms of robustness and also part of the attack surface. Again, obviously we see these systems evolving into agentic systems that are composed of multiple agents, which I think their safety and security is even more difficult to control. And in many applications right now, they even orchestrate many of the resources and interact in ways almost like an operating system, which even puts higher requirements on their reliability. And I think on the horizon, we see even more complicated systems that are open-ended or are supposed to self-evolve in the future. And again, I'll also talk about some of the issues we will be facing there. Maybe the main message here is that while there is, again, this steep career of these foundation models, the technology in its essence has been staying the same. So this raises questions: how do we meet the new expectations on trustworthiness, safety, security, and cybersecurity with this technology, and basically how it's being used and employed? So I only have time to very quickly touch on each of these points. I think this is also kind of getting you into this mode of thinking on these different dimensions and give some examples throughout the talk. So for the trustworthiness and security of LLMs, I think we need to understand that's basically software in essence. So it's not something else. And as software, it has an attack surface and vulnerabilities as any other software. Classic software has been characterized in vulnerabilities, and there are similar taxonomies right now for AI that try to basically structure the attack surface in different ways these systems can be manipulated and also exploited. The same holds true for LLM and agents. There are also by now taxonomies that try to outline in which ways they are vulnerable to different attacks and manipulations. So the takeaway message here is, again, we cannot live in this happy place that AI kind of this secure enclave where we run things. But as we go into deployment, we, on the one hand, see these systems more exposed to different risks. And also we have to take more a systems view to see what all factors come into play to make these systems secure and safe. And that not only involves the AI component, but also with the libraries we build on, the human interaction with it, but also the hardware it runs on. We have, again, tested some of these in a capture the flag challenge, which more was targeted towards the general trustworthiness. This basically task was we told a secret to an LLM and instructed it to keep the secret. That might be sounding like a bit of a funny task, but again, it tests basic properties of confidentiality and instruction following. very clear instructions, don't tell the secret to anybody, but none of the current LLMs can keep a secret. And again, it's just a manifestation of the problem that instruction following is not solved. And again, basic properties can't really easily be achieved. Let me already move on to the Copilot example. Again, this is something where we seek assistance by these LLMs in coding tasks. And while this can provide a huge productivity boost, we also have high requirements on the quality of code that comes out of this. Otherwise, again, we might even do more harm than actually good. And we investigated this, basically how these models fare and how many vulnerabilities they actually produce. And it turns out that many of these models do actually produce many vulnerabilities that then would go into production code. And therefore, we need to keep a close eye on how trustworthy the actual code is that is produced by these models. We found kind of a clever way how to do few-shot prompting inversion techniques that also works for black box models, for which we basically, given a vulnerability, find prompts that would elicitate certain vulnerabilities in the coding models. And as this also runs for black box models, we can do this for open as well as for closed models. Via these techniques, we were able to find hundreds of vulnerabilities that are produced. We basically could find their prompts, and we find these in open models as well as in closed source GitHub Copilot applications, which indicates there's a lot of work still to be done to really we can use them in a trusted manner in real world applications. I'd like to give you a bit of a broader context now on what some of these more malicious and adversarial issues are with those models. And here I turn to the next scenario, which is our use of these models as information retriever or mediators, like, for example, in Google Gemini, where we use them for web search and summarization of content. And we can discover these vulnerabilities basically before really GitHub, before the Microsoft Copilot was released. And many of the vulnerabilities we discovered, again, now actually manifesting, we provide proof of concepts, but again, this has been turned out to be actually realistic threat scenarios. The main issue here is that we ingest content that is untrusted. For example, in many of these applications, we would ingest content from the web or from code bases or from emails. So in general, external input that in many applications is ingested by the foundation model and then processed. The issue with this is that while the user might prompt the model to perform a certain task, we can't foresee that maybe adversarial prompts or instructions are basically infiltrated into the model via these external sources. And unfortunately, these prompts can override the instructions by the user and therefore adversarially steer foundation models to perform different or malicious tasks. So this is an issue, and I'll get to the core why this is a problem and where it comes from in a minute. It's kind of the manifestation of adversarial examples, but in a world of foundation models and LLMs. These problems we have raised have been widely recognized. They're also part of the NIST threat taxonomy. There's a whole subsection on indirect prompt injection attacks and potential mitigations. So early on, we outlined kind of a threat surface and basically reconstructed basically all possible threats, so to say, that you will see in classical cybersecurity with this new kind of compute paradigm. And this ranges from information gathering over fraud, intrusion, and also availability attacks, which might be very relevant for deployment. But also we hypothesized actually that future malware could be based on such compute platforms like LLMs and agents. Just as a side note, there are also multi-modal injections. We hypothesized at that time that we posted this, it was already quite, was still quite rudimentary, but by now we have seen much more complicated proof of concepts where via multimodal inputs, injections have been made possible. And obviously other modalities might have much higher payload to steer and manipulate these models via ingested content. But again, it didn't really stop there, so to say. Again, as I said in the beginning, the current models are almost used like an operating system-like fashion, where they orchestrate many of the activities. Different resources are being orchestrated by LLMs to arrive at very complex systems. And this also brings me a bit to the root cause, what we are facing right now with the use of these foundation models in these complex systems, which is they don't really have a notion of instruction data separation. And again, you would never use any operating system or even a CPU hardware that wouldn't have proper separation between data and instruction, because it's known to be a key kind of issue that enables many different types of attacks. But still, we're using this technology that was designed for basically chatbots to have these very complex orchestration capabilities. And many of the issues we're seeing right now emerge from this problem. So again, I just illustrate this problem a bit in more detail. Again, typically we think of there's a task prompt that we give to an LLM, for example. In this case, it would be that it should identify the sentiment polarity of the following text. And then we give it a data prompt, which basically is the statement that the LLM is supposed to operate on. So this is kind of our assumption that the first part is the instruction and the second part is interpreted as the data. And the issue is now, if we, for example, append another instruction to the data prompt, it's not really clear that it's still interpreted as data. So here I've appended the additional prompt to the data prompt, tell me what a group of crows is called. In the answer would be murder, which is what a group of crows is called. And now, again, it's really the question how the LLM or the foundation model is interpreting this. Is it taking on the new instruction, or does it have a clear separation between what was the task and what is the actual data it's supposed to process on? So based on this, we defined a measure. Basically, if we move those, this basically what we call a probe around, if how the model reacts to this probe, and if it interprets it as data or as instruction, and then we have a benchmark where we can evaluate how different models fare in this terms of a data instruction separation. So it turns out the models out of the box are quite poor at data instruction separation. So here in the plot, you see the utility to the right and the separation score to the top. So ideally, you would put in the upper right corner. And the dots, basically the round dot icons, are the plain models without any augmentation. And they actually don't perform very well in the separation score. They're all below basically 0.7 roughly here in the score. So there are different ways to improve this, and some models respond well to different prompting optimizations or fine-tuning. But overall, we see more sophisticated attacks emerge that still break these issues. And there's recent work now that try to more systematically approach this by information flow and how to regulate how information is being processed by interpreting different data and prompting strategies in separate ways. Moving on again, I think so far I've been talking only about isolated foundation models and LLMs, but I think we see more and more agentic systems evolve. And I think what we see in the future even more are heterogeneous, potentially distributed systems where different agents would interact across maybe different sites. Maybe my AI agent would negotiate or interact with an agent of maybe an airline or something else. So this even increases the complexity of a single agent transitioning to multiple of these agents that engage in heterogeneous complex interactions. We took a first step here at analyzing what kind of threats would emerge from these scenarios. So just to illustrate that a bit, we have been looking at multiple agents that try to negotiate on a certain task. In this case, it would be building a new sports facility. So the different agents would take on different roles and try to reach a common agreement that would satisfy the requirements of each agent, but also basically try to maximize their score in terms of a certain utility they would get from certain alternatives for the positions to be decided on. So basically, they would over time, over multiple rounds, exchange information and try to reach a consensus over time. The main message I want to get across here that agents are actually capable of reaching these negotiation tasks, but still it's very easy for a greedy or an adversarial agent to manipulate other agents in that deliberation stage. And therefore, these systems are very brittle. And there's even some real-world examples where some agents have been promising compensations by an airline, and then actually legally the airline was bound to actually stick to their promises. And that was even not really adversarial, but we see there's a lot of risk right now. And the systems will be very complex as they might do ad hoc connections, and I don't even know all the agents involved. So that's one of the big future challenges we see for these agent type of interactions in the future. The last point I want to end here in terms of the emerging challenges are open-ended or self-evolving systems. I think this is something that is also very prominently pitched in the context of AI for science. And in general, the opportunity that AI systems might over time produce new artifacts and then build on these and further evolve and basically be a research assistant, or maybe even come to a state where they do even future discoveries on their own in a guided process. One of the examples that have been generated quite some attention is these AI scientists, which might sound very science fiction here, but it basically goes through several stages of an LLM idea generation, novelty checking, idea scoring, and then running the experiments and all the way to writing a manuscript. So this might not be how we want to do this, but I think it illustrates some of the momentum right now, how future systems might evolve and might become more autonomous in the way they discover information and also explore different hypotheses over time. I think this raises some interesting questions, how to steer those systems and keep them aligned. And we recently wrote a position paper, how safety and alignment is becoming even more challenging if you think about those open-ended systems that potentially self-evolve over time. As mentioned, again, there are large opportunities to be had with those systems, but also many risks that we need to overcome. Again, these systems are more difficult to steer and maybe less predictable, and kind of controlling them is a big challenge. Also, how to keep them aligned to our goals and also provide oversight in the different stages of the process. So we have several actionable items, how we see that we should increase interpretability of those systems, also restrict them, but also how to provide human oversight and provide auditing mechanisms. And there's a difficult space of trade-offs that we would need to navigate to bring those to success. So to stay within time, I think I want to write down some big questions I think we'll be facing over the next 2-3 years. I already mentioned that, again, we have to see as AI part of our software landscape, and therefore have a system view how we integrate them and make them safe and secure. I illustrated this with prompt injection attacks, but in general, there is an issue of AI safety and security that we have to pay attention to. The other emerging problem that I see that we'll be facing also probably quite soon is these heterogeneous, distributed, probably dynamic multi-agent system that we might want to use, and to make them reliable and secure, I think is a big challenge. Lastly, I hinted at recent developments on open-ended self-evolving systems that again pose another bag of challenges that we haven't quite really understood. There are also several risks that I didn't touch upon today, which are also investigated, for example, by the AI Office, that relates to chemical, biological, radio, and nuclear risks, cybersecurity risks, loss of control risk, misinformation risk that emerge from general purpose AI models. And again, their assessment and mitigation is something we're also working on. And I think that we have to definitely keep an eye on people performing uplift studies on this right now, but also trying to have for example, a red teaming assessment of the capabilities that emerge from these general purpose AI models. I think if I have to name one domain where this would manifest or crystallize maybe in the near future, it will probably be cybersecurity, because in these areas, I think we will see a significant uplift from general purpose AI models. And I think there's a high pressure to match the increased risks by AI-enabled attackers. So I think this is an interesting discussion we need to have in the near future, how to navigate that space. The last point I want to leave here is a research agenda that the ELSA consortium has written to address some of these issues. So we wrote down some of the cornerstones we think are really important to be prepared to address the upcoming challenges in secure and safe AI. I think we have to learn more lessons from cybersecurity, how to do threat modeling and risk analysis. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we should still strive for foundational research guarantees and insights, despite the importance of auditing and evaluation of methods that are maybe more prominent right now. There's a strong interdisciplinary aspect, and I think also we need to take often a more system view instead of looking at AI in isolation. There are several other points. Again, there's a strong socio-technical aspect, governance and legal aspect, which I think we will hope to hear more in some of the next talks. And again, we also make a strong point on openness, transparency, and accountability. And we hope to accompany our research on basically developing capabilities and improving methods, also with an understanding where inherent limitations and trade-offs are, because in many cases, we probably can't achieve all the properties at the same time. And I think there's too little research that understands those inherent limitations better to also guide our research in the most fruitful directions. Again, if you're interested, again, look at our strategic research agenda and also more information on ELSA on our website. With that, thank you very much. I hope I got you interested and maybe also more aware of some of the issues we are seeing that are present right now and also upcoming in the future. And I would very much look forward to the discussion in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mario, for the talk. Is there any question from the audience? I think we are ready to speak. Either one or two, depending on how many we have. The main one is Mario only listening to right?
No, she's also listening.
Okay. So Mario, one question from my side. So you mentioned that, of course, we have to take trustworthiness into account also for these new models that are coming out, like agentic models and so on. You mentioned the case in which there's two LLMs interacting together, so two agents interacting. There's also the case actually in which there's an LLM that interacts with an existing system like an API, you see an LLM that can read your emails or whatever. So here the trustworthy problem takes a completely new perspective, because it's not only about what we generate, but also the impact that we do and the action.
Can you get a speaker mic, please? It's really difficult for me to hear. Maybe you can talk into the speaker mic. I think that's the only one I can really. I got it so far roughly. Maybe just continue the question.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So let me redo the question again. So you mentioned that, of course, we need to take trustworthiness into account when we have different agents interacting together, which is kind of going to be the next frontiers of AI. I was mentioning there's also the case in which you have an agent that interacts with an existing system through an API, say, I don't know, your LLM that can read your email or write emails for you and whatever. So of course, in this case, the ethics and the trustworthiness problem kind of gets a new perspective, because it's not only about what you generate, it's also about the impact of the actions that you do in the real world, actually, at this point. So I was curious how you see this, and what's your perspective on this, and what you think we can do on this to ensure that they are safe and trustworthy.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes a bit scary how much mandate we give to these models. I think also a bit of my pitch here that, again, the technology we are using is not really, so to say, fit for office if we use it in this orchestration operating system-like manner. And I think this we need to understand. Again, I don't see really on the horizon how the current technology can be used or basically changed in incremental steps to really achieve that level of security that we would require from such a role in an IT ecosystem. I think there are very interesting ways also, like from Google DeepMind, Alina Oprea has worked on this, Florian Trame have worked on this, and there's also a company, a startup, Invariant Labs, that has worked that try to control information flow. So you can basically impose, for example, privacy boundaries, or you can basically separate instructions from data streams. So it's more, again, zooming out from the individual foundation model to more an operational information flow level, where you can then also give guarantees or prove certain properties on the information flow, which I think is a good way to mitigate this. Ultimately, it will come at a certain cost of utility, but I think that's what the community is exploring right now, what trade-offs we are willing to basically accept. But I think these are good mitigations, because on the technological level, I don't really see how these problems can be mitigated in a fundamental way.
Thank you very much. Is there any other question from the audience? I think we can definitely take a quick one. Apparently not. Okay, so let's thank the speaker again. Thank you, Mario, for being with us. And thanks for the great talk.
Thank you.